If you've ever wanted to get into backpacking, chances are you've watched videos online that make it look incredibly easy. You see people hiking through massive mountain ranges with tiny backpacks, setting up camp beside crystal clear lakes, cooking dinner while watching the sunset, and somehow looking completely comfortable the entire time. Everything seems simple, but what people don't usually show is how many mistakes beginners usually make when they first go on a backpacking trip. And honestly, almost every backpacker has made at least a few of these mistakes. I definitely have. The truth is, backpacking has a pretty big learning curve. A lot of things that sound simple on paper become way harder once you're actually on trail and are carrying everything you need on your back for miles. It's another thing to hike uphill for 6 hours in the rain with sore feet and a backpack that feels way heavier than it did that morning. The good thing is that most beginner mistakes are completely avoidable, and even better, they're usually easy to fix once you know what to look for. So in this video, I'm going over some of the biggest backpacking mistakes beginners make, why they happen, and how to avoid them so that your first trips are a lot more enjoyable. Because a lot of people quit backpacking after they had one bad experience, when really most of the problems came from mistakes that every beginner makes. Let's get into this video. Mistake 1. Packing way too much stuff. This is probably the most common mistake beginner backpackers usually make. When people first get into backpacking, they're terrified of forgetting something important, so they start packing for every possible situation. Extra clothes, too much food, heavy gear, multiple backup items, random just-in-case equipment, and before you know it, their backpack weighs 40, 50, or even 60 pounds. That might not sound terrible when you're standing in your living room, but once you're hiking uphill for hours carrying that gear, it becomes a completely different story. Your shoulders hurt, your hips hurt, you move slower, you get tired faster, and eventually, the hike becomes more about surviving than it is enjoying it. A lot of beginners think backpacking is supposed to feel miserable physically. In reality, their pack is often just too heavy. One thing I've learned over the years is that every item in your backpack should earn a spot. Not because you might use it, but because there is a good chance that you actually will use it. A lighter pack changes everything. You hike faster, you recover better, you enjoy the scenery more, you have more energy at camp, and honestly, backpacking becomes way more enjoyable. That doesn't mean you need to immediately become an ultralight backpacker and spend thousands of dollars on gear. It just means paying attention to unnecessary weight, because most people don't realize how much 10 or 20 small items add up until they're halfway through a long hike, wondering why their backpack feels like a big bag of bricks. Mistake 2. Wearing the wrong clothes. Another huge mistake beginners make is dressing completely wrong for hiking conditions. A lot of people start backpacking wearing cotton shirts, sweatshirts, jeans, or random gym clothes without realizing how important proper layering actually is. Cotton is especially problematic. There is a saying in the outdoor world, cotton kills. Now that sounds dramatic, but the reason people say it is because cotton absorbs water and dries very slowly. If you're sweating all day or getting caught in rain, that clothing can make you cold surprisingly fast when the temperatures drop. That's why most backpackers use synthetic or wool materials. They dry faster, manage moisture better, and help regulate temperature. Another beginner mistake is packing way too much clothing. A lot of people would bring an outfit for every day because that's how we'd normally do it on a vacation. But backpacking isn't really like a normal vacation. Most backpackers wear the same clothing for multiple days. Not because they enjoy being dirty, but because carrying extra clothing adds weight very quickly. And then there's weather. Weather forecasts can be wrong. Conditions can change rapidly. A warm sunny day can turn into a cold wind and rain surprisingly fast, especially in the mountains. That's why layers are so important. Instead of relying on one giant jacket, experienced backpackers usually build a flexible clothing system that can adapt to changing conditions throughout the day. Mistake 3. Choosing a trail that's too difficult. This is a mistake that becomes even more common because of social media. A lot of beginners accidentally turn their first trip into a suffer feast because they choose a trail that's way beyond their limits. They see experienced hikers doing 20-mile days, massive elevation gains, remote wilderness routes, multi-day adventures through tough terrain, and they assume that's what backpacking is supposed to look like. But what people forget is that those hikers don't start there. They build up to it over time. Your first backpacking trip does not need to be extreme. In fact, it probably shouldn't. A shorter, easier trip usually gives you room to learn without feeling overwhelmed. Because when beginners push too hard too soon, a few things usually happen. They become exhausted. They stop enjoying the scenery. They spend the entire trip focused on discomfort, and sometimes they decide backpacking just isn't for them. The goal of your first trip is to improve anything. It's to learn. Learn how your gear works. Learn how your body responds to carrying gear. Learn how much food you actually need. Learn how to set up camp efficiently, and learn what mistakes you make. Even experienced backpackers are constantly learning and adjusting. So there's no prize in making your first trip unnecessarily difficult. Mistake 4. Ignoring food and water planning. Food always seems simple before the first trip. Then you get out on trail and realize you've been hiking uphill for hours, and suddenly you're starving. Backpacking burns a huge amount of energy. Depending on the terrain and distance, you can easily burn thousands of calories in a single day. A lot of beginners either don't bring enough food or bring foods that sounded great at home but become unappealing on trail. One thing most people don't usually expect is that hiking changes your appetite. Foods that seem delicious at home might be the last thing you would ever want to eat on trail. Other foods melt, some get crushed, some become difficult to prepare, and some simply aren't worth the wait. Water planning is even more important. Many beginners assume water will be everywhere. Then they discover a stream shown on a map has dried up, or that the next water source is farther than they expected. Running low on water can quickly turn into a serious problem. That's why experienced backpackers usually research water sources before they go on trail. They know where the water is, how reliable it is, and how much they need to carry between sources. And it's important to remember that clear water isn't necessarily safe water. Most natural water should be filtered or treated before drinking because of bacteria, parasites, giardia, and other contaminations can exist in streams that look pretty clean. Mistake 5. Not testing gear before the trip. This mistake ruins more trips than people realize. Some beginners buy a bunch of new gear and use all of it for the first time in the middle of the wilderness. That's a really risky move. You don't want your first attempt at pitching a tent to happen during a storm. You don't want to realize that your sleeping pad leaks after hiking 10 miles to camp. And you definitely don't want to realize that your backpack doesn't fit properly once you're deep in the backcountry. Testing gear beforehand can prevent a lot of frustration. Practice setting up your camp, practice setting up your tent, use your stove, adjust your backpack, take a short hike carrying all your gear, or even spending one night camping close to home can teach you a lot. Because small inconveniences at home can become much bigger problems when you're far into the backcountry. Mistake 6. Bad foot care. Your feet are basically your transportation, and beginners often don't think about them much until something starts hurting. Unfortunately, by then, it's usually too late. Blisters are usually the most common problems beginner backpackers usually face, and they can change an amazing trip into a very miserable one very quickly. Blisters usually happen because of bad shoe fitting, wet feet, bad socks, excessive friction, or footwear that hasn't properly been broken in. One mistake beginners make is assuming they need heavy, massive hiking shoes. Sometimes they do, but comfort matters way more than appearance. The best hiking shoe is the one that usually fits your feet well and allows you to walk comfortably for long periods. Another important lesson is dealing with problems early. If you feel a hot spot forming, stop. Don't wait. Experienced hikers often stop immediately to adjust socks, tape hot spots, or whatever is causing friction. 5 minutes of prevention can save you hours of pain later. Because once your feet are wrecked, every single mile feels 10 times longer. Mistake 7. Not respecting weather. Weather is one of the most underestimated parts of backpacking. People often assume that since the weather is good at the trailhead, it'll stay like that for the rest of the day. Nature doesn't always work that way. Mountain weather can change incredibly fast. A beautiful morning can become a cold, windy, stormy afternoon without very much warning. And beginners sometimes make dangerous decisions because they think things will improve on their own. Backpacking teaches you very quickly that weather does not care about your schedule, or your campsite reservation, or your plans. That's why checking forecasts matters so much. Having proper layers matter. Knowing emergency options matter. Sometimes the smartest decisions are knowing when to change your plans. There's no shame in hiking another day when the weather is better. The mountains aren't going anywhere. Mistake 8. Thinking expensive gear will solve everything. This is something social media has definitely made worse. You can watch backpacking content online for 10 minutes and start thinking You need thousands of dollars of gear before you're able to go outside. The newest tent, the latest backpack, the latest gadgets. And while good gear can absolutely change your experience on trail, expensive gear isn't what makes someone a good backpacker. Skills matter more. Planning matters more. Decision making matters more. You can have the most expensive setup in the world and still struggle if you don't know how to use it efficiently. A lot of experienced backpackers started with budget gear, borrowed gear, or older equipment, and over time they upgraded based on experience. That's usually a smarter approach because you actually learn what matters to your style of backpacking before spending large amounts of money. Mistake 9. Leaving trash or ignoring trail equity. This one is incredibly important. A lot of environmental damage happens because people don't know better. Things like leaving trash behind, cutting switchbacks, going off trail unnecessarily, playing loud music, camping too close to water sources, or feeding wildlife. Individually, those actions might seem small, but when millions of people visit the outdoor areas every year, those impacts add up quickly. That's why leave no trace principles exist. The goal is simple. Leave the area as natural as possible so that other hikers or people in the outdoors can enjoy it too. Good trail equity isn't just about respecting nature, although it's about respecting other hikers too. Most people head into the outdoors because they want peace, quiet, and a chance to disconnect from the speeding society. Being considerate helps everyone have a better experience. Mistake 10. Focusing too much on the destination. This is a mistake that doesn't get talked about much. A lot of beginners become so focused on reaching a lake, summit, or campsite that they forget to actually enjoy the hike. They're constantly checking mileage, checking maps, checking the clock, worrying about staying on schedule, and before you know it, they've rushed through an incredible landscape without even appreciating it. One of the best things backpacking teaches you is how to slow down. Some of the best memories don't happen at the destination. They happen along the way. The random wildlife encounter, the unexpected viewpoint, or the sunrise that you weren't planning to see. The destination is important, but the journey is usually what you'll remember years later. At the end of the day, beginners are going to make mistakes, and that's completely normal. Every backpacker has forgotten gear. Every backpacker has packed too much. Every backpacker has gotten caught in bad weather. Every backpacker has had at least one trip that didn't go according to plan. That's part of the process. The important thing is not letting those mistakes tell you that backpacking is not for you, because backpacking can become one of the most rewarding hobbies you'll ever experience. It teaches you problem solving, patience, confidence, adaptability, and it gives you access to places most people will never see. Over time, every trip will teach you something new. You get a little smarter, a little more comfortable, and a little more capable. So if you're new to backpacking, don't worry about being perfect. Start simple, keep learning, make mistakes, and focus on the experience instead of trying to look like an expert right away. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. And drop a comment with your favorite tip, something new you learned, or even what your backpacking background looks like. I'd honestly love to hear your stories and your outdoor experiences. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys out on trail. Have you guys ever tried one of these? So good. Yeah.